Glad to be here, and I guess it's one of those things. It's delightful. Some of you guys I've known over 40 years. I'm only 45 years old, so I met y'all at a real early age, but it's delightful to be here. When Ken was talking about some of the controversy, he brought up that egg white was not an animal protein. I always think back to one of the big arguments I got into. I was in Texas. They were talking about debeaking baby chicks, and the animal rights group said it was better to kill the chicks than it was to debeak them. And I always try to figure out the philosophy of that how death beats a certain little surgical procedure. So anyway, the thought is way too deep for me, and I can't figure those kind of things out. So I'll get into something I might know a little bit about, or might not. But just a real quick background. Born and raised in the DeSoto Parish, sort of dairy beef operation. We also did timber and cotton. I was at Rosebud Research Station. David Morrison, who's out back when there used to be a Rosebud Research Station. It's not anymore. Past president of this organization, also the American Forage and Grassland Council. I was vice chairman of the National GLCI, Grazing Lands Conservation Initiative, and actually was involved in writing that procedure back in, I think that was at about 86, 87, 88, something along there. And then I was chairman of the Mississippi GLCI for 3 years, so heavily involved with a lot of those kind of things like that. But we're at Southern University. I've been there since September. We're looking at cow-calf production. Louisiana, of course, as we all know, is primarily a cow-calf production state. If you look at it, once calves are weaned, most of them moved out of state. Some of them are accumulated and stockered, but most of them leave the state. So it's primarily a cow-calf operation, and it's unfortunate or fortunate. Louisiana has so much good land and other opportunities, and of course, beef cattle operations typically are on more marginal land. If you can grow corn, soybeans, crawfish, a lot of things like that, that tends to be more economically viable. So the state is a little limited, and of course there's a lot of timberland, which is quite a valuable product as well. So it's all primarily forage-based, primarily the hay grass and Bermuda grass we use, but there's a lot of other new things that are out there that we'll be looking at as well. But the goal is efficient operation on these The Southern University Farm, if you're familiar with Baton Rouge, is north of Baton Rouge in Scotlandville. It's about 350 acres in size, and from a research standpoint, it's really, really nice. There's probably 25 or 30 different paddocks. So if you want individual, if you want to compare forages and management systems and those kind of things, there's lots and lots of little individual pastures. In fact, there's a setup that there's 18 3-acre paddocks that are available for a lot of stuff like that. So we'll be using a lot of those things in the future and look at these, but we're not only going to just stop with cow-calf production, we're going to move those things all the way to raising a lot of replacement heifers, plus finishing out a lot of beef that we're going to have there. Daniel, for years and years, we had Angus and Angus cross cows. We had Brangus cows, primarily, and of course that Brangus makes them very adapted to the hot and humid conditions we have. They're a little tougher to work with from time to time. They like to get closer to your back pocket and see what you've been chewing and how much money you got. But that's just part of it. We also are looking at, I was involved in the year-round forest feed production process when Dan and I worked together many, many years ago. But now we're looking at more of a finished product. So we're going to launch that at Southern University's homecoming next November. We're going to serve our first round of Sun beef, which is Southern University all natural beef that will be grown, produced, and finished on site there and then processed actually on campus that will move those things forward as a co-product that we run into all this. So again, it's primarily a cow-calf herd with spring calving cows. The soils, of course, are very heavy texture soils, but we're looking at differences in how we handle the cows before they calve and after they calve for a few months, and see what the lifetime impact that has on these calves. Obviously, if you've read it, as if we get most of this information out of dairy operations, what you see is, and if you just think about colostrum, if they compare inadequate versus adequate colostrum, the Holstein calves got adequate colostrum, milk 1,400 pounds more milk every year for their entire lifetime, based on what happened the first 12 or so hours of life. You can also look at some research work in this program. You can look at what happened in the first 60 days of life. For every pound more they gained the first 60 days of life, they produce about 1,200 pounds more milk for each pound of extra gain that they get into. So we're getting more and more serious about just how we handle those calves, particularly for what we want to have is these cows milking better, in better condition when the calves hit the ground, and how we handle those cows for the first 60 days. What we also know as animal scientists, one of the problems we run into is we take heifers and get them too fat. The adipose tissue fills in what the alveolar tissue should produce, and all of a sudden I get these nice big cows that don't milk well. It's because we did such a terrible job of managing them. If you've ever been around the show circuit, I don't know that I've ever seen, I saw a group when I was in Mississippi, they were 18-month-old Hereford heifers. All of them were over 2,000 pounds at 18 months of age. My guess is they probably didn't keep a single calf out of any of those because those mamas couldn't milk. So it gets into what your intent and your purpose is. If I want high-producing dairy cows, beef cows, that produce a very good calf, what the science tends to point to is we want to be very vigilant about what happens the day of birth, what happens that first 60 days or so, but after that, we'd like to see those calves maintained in a much thinner condition, body store conditions of 5 and 6s, and never let those girls get fat at all, to how we promote lifetime productivity of those cows simply by how we manage them. So then the corollary gets into, but what about the steers? And it looks like it's two completely different approaches we run into. That Ken and I were talking about on the way up here. It appears what happens is, and if you read the science, most marbling is oleic acid, which tends to be produced from higher quality things, starchy feeds, grain. So it's one of those things. I worked with a dairy producer out of Ohio, and he was killing 13-month-old Holstein calves, 13 months old, weighing 1,400 pounds. After they got a milk fat, they put on the feedlot. He was getting 65% prime out of 13-month-old calves. So there's more and more philosophy is I want to put that marbling on them as their babies with these high energy kind of feeds like that. Marbling is the first to get the last job, the first one, so I can keep that marbling from that calf fat and keep them fat. I can maintain that on through market as they do with those Holstein calves and get 65% prime. In case you don't know it, in the United States, only about 2 to 2.5% of the calves that are fed out in feedlots with great prime. And here this guy's got a Holstein that are not supposed to do very well, and he's getting 65%. So there's a lot of things that we're learning about how we manage. One is that we really want prime cattle. There's certainly a strong market for it in certain places. There's also a lot of people that don't like it, but it's kind of like when we go shop for cars. Some people like Cadillacs, some people like Chevrolet, and some people like a lot of, so you want to produce what the market's going to demand and make sure that works for you. We're going to do probably a lot of work with Bahia grass, which tends to be one of those, is close to a year-round grass that we're going to probably get. A low seed producer, but also some of the other grasses that are out there, and put those in and try those. And again, it's nice to have so many small paddocks. We can look at them. We're under grazing conditions, and it's not so much the yield. It's nice if I can grow 6 tons of forage. It's much nicer if I can produce 400 pounds of beef per acre of it. So again, it gets into what cattle will eat, what they're going to do. And one of the projects I've worked on for many years, we had fall creek grazing, and we could average increased wean weights by about 75 or 80 pounds per calf, simply by having 1/10 of an acre of creek grazing for those calves. When we're talking about fall calving, that's a wintertime creek. I don't know how many of y'all have tried this. We have worked for years trying to find a summer creek grazing pasture, and have been terribly unsuccessful because you have to have a grass that's high enough in quality that a baby calf will leave his mama where he's comfortable and walk through a fence and get over somewhere else where it doesn't. David and I were at Rosebud Station. The only grass I've seen I thought even came close to it was a dwarf elephant grass and napier grass. Somebody had left the gate to the forage plots open one Friday afternoon, and that's, of course, the weekend the cows broke out. The cows all went into the forage plot area. There was alfalfa, white clover, red clover, ryegrass, and across the back of the fence was dwarf elephant grass. Those cows walked in, and the only thing they ate of the ground was dwarf elephant grass. So it's something like that. It's almost impossible if you try to produce stuff. It's almost impossible to transplant. But surely there's a grass like that we can promote for spring calving cows. We're talking about the middle of summer when our Bermuda grass, Bahia grass clods get kind of poor. That will attract those, will want to make them leave mama to where they'll go find a higher quality grass than what we got out there for them already. So again, we're also looking at mosaics where we'll have small acreages of 6 or 7 different forages and let small groups of animals come in and graze those. It's important to know which grasses they prefer, simply from the standpoint, will they leave mama to go out to a creek hole to go somewhere else? But also, how do those grasses come back? Will they respond to treading? If I graze them down one time and they don't grow back, I have not gotten very far in this issue, so I need something the cow will go graze. When I get off of arrested, it'll come back again and produce me a second, maybe a third crop on some of these. So again, these summer creek grazing areas are one of those things that we work on. One of the big projects, and of course Stuart knows a lot about this, we've talked about it on the phones many times, is we're in the process of identifying some farmers to do some on-farm demonstration research projects with to decide. It's always about the transfer of information. We used to talk about from the time a discovery is made, it was 10 years before it actually reached the farm level. So the hope would be, as discoveries are made and we have on-farm demonstrations, 5 or 6 of those around the state, we can get that into farmers' hands. And Dave, as much as I used to think about Larry Roosevelt, we talked about how people should believe us, but how many times I've heard the story says, well, if I had the resources you guys got, I could do this. So the point is, if we have those same kind of plots on individual farmers, and you go to your farm friend next door, and he's having success with this, my guess is that you're going to believe me, you're going to have that same success because you've seen it done on the farm. So we're in the process of putting these teams together with best management practices and work with those. And we did that when I was at Mississippi under GL Stein. I think we had 5 of those around the state that we put in that we helped support those kind of things that had field days. And Stuart, they were out in large field days. We'd have 40 or 50 producers who show up on these things on a routine basis. And again, they tend to get a whole lot out of those kind of things and move those around pretty well. Kanjun is here, so I'm going to bring up my friend. I've done some work with biochar, which is a leftover product. When I burn something out of oxygen, I get a char left behind. And it's a little amazing. Have any of y'all ever heard of graphene? Do a Google search or look under Wikipedia. This stuff is a very, very light powder. It can be manufactured different stuff. They also make body armor out of it. If your shirt were made out of biochar instead of cotton, it would be lighter weight, but it'd also be bulletproof. And they're putting coatings of that on like I've seen they've already made manufacturers like police uniforms where they put the helmets on. Shirts like that is a bulletproof, but it also is a great conductor of electricity, and it also captures methane. And as we know from cattle ruminant species, they give off a lot of methane from time to time. And that's the most energy-dense compound there is methane. If we can reincorporate that back into the rumen, which is what we do in the feedlot, it improves animal performance by about 10 percentage units. So we're incorporating that. I guess we're going to have those results. It's going to be at least 40 hours before we start getting some of those results. But we have the graphene on bark. And the issue used to be horribly expensive. When graphene first came out, it was only about 2% of the biochar was graphene. And it was $454 per gram, which puts it at about $160,000 a pound. So one of the kind of things that many people use. Well, now the scientist that invented this stuff has gotten to where he can, a slight conversion, get a 99% conversion rate of it, and now it's down to more like about $30 a gram. So the price has dropped dramatically, and it could be used in some of our diets like this to minimize methane gas losses in these animal production systems. Danny, I kind of fell upon this issue of swathing. I was in Tennessee last year. Where we have hay fields, we have large amounts of Johnson grass. Well, it got to the fall year, we had a late fall, but by the time you get to fall, the temperatures are cool, the days are short, you can't even think about making a hay crop. Pick out something, big old Johnson grass out there. So we came with the idea of swathing. And I want to make the point, this is only kind of an emergency thing. It probably didn't work very well, and I'm not sure about the economics of it. What we did, we know that once Johnson grass freezes, I can have problems with poison, with prussic acid poison, things like that. So what we did, we went into what we call swathing. We cut the fields down and just let them lay there. And the hope is, what we think happened was the forage just dried out pretty much on the ground. Of course, if you get a lot of rain, you can know the problem of that and the packing and the things you run into that are negative about that. We had a pretty dry fall though, and what happened was we swapped it versus letting it stand, but forage quality was substantially higher where we cut it, let it dry, and just laid it out there than what we had the standing crop. And the fly, what we think happened is the standing crop, once the freeze hit, that's when the plant cells ruptured, the forage quality went dramatically down. We had an issue of prussic acid poisoning for a couple of days. Whereas if we cut the grass and just let it lay out there and didn't get a lot of rain on it, it dried like a hay crop does. We let the cows out there to graze it, the forage quality was higher. A hay crop would have been better. So again, this is one of those emergency kind of things. So we look at swathing like forage heights and those kind of things where we just lay it out there that the cows can graze it without the expense of bedding and stuff up for hay. One of the ones that I really like working with is all the technology that's involved, and I just refer to generally as cattle tracking. Knowing where cows are, what happens with them, like for estrus synchronization, I'd like to know. If I'm trying to figure out where cows locate, where they like to graze, we will know that kind of thing. The simple thing, and of course this is very, very complicated, we can do that now. The only problem is, it only costs me about $100 per cow to do that. And most people, it's not economically feasible, so it's hardly worth the effort to go in there. But we're getting some systems out here that are much better. And this one is a simple one I'll show you. This is our Fly Motel, this is right called. RFID ear tags are like the barcode that you run into at Walmart. They only read about 30 inches. The company we're working with, though, has some newer technology out there that's about 20 feet, which is a little more promising. But so what this does is a cow has an RFID tag in her left ear. She sticks her head in there for mineral. This is a mineral feeder. Sticks her head in there. That reader reads who she is, sends a signal through Wi-Fi or cellular network. The cow, and we recognize who the cow is. So we can do an inventory. We know how she comes to eat minerals. And also, this is tied up to the National Weather Service. So if it's been 18 days since that cow is sprayed for horn fly control, what will happen is she'll get sprayed. Unless the National Weather Service says it's raining, the wind is over 10 miles an hour. If there's any of those things that are in there, then it simply skips her that day through the locking of the system and comes back later on and sprays it the next time she comes in when the climatic conditions are easier, which keeps you from getting cows and all that. David, I used to always hate the days we had to get bulls up and worked in because sooner or later one of them's going to run somebody down and hurt. This way, you don't have to get them up for those routine kind of management practices. And if you can do horn fly control that way, why not dewormers? So this has a 5-gallon container on the top of it. So the system was designed to where twice a year when you want to deworm your cows, you simply put dewormer in that container and not fly control it with those guys. They only spray one time. So you spray it one time, when it's done, you unload your dewormer and then put fly control back in there again. So it's the kind of thing students really like this kind of stuff, and they're so much smarter than I am, and they like to mess with this stuff. I'm not smart enough to do this kind of thing, but they really get involved in the middle of it, which is kind of exciting from their standpoint. Finally, one of the things we're doing is March the 1st is when we'll have the information out. So if you're interested, I'll give you some contact information. We're going to have, it will be first online, there'll be a limited number of publications. So it's a 430-page book, the Southern University Ag Center's Beef and Forage Guideline for limited resource farmers. It's kind of a Q&A kind of a thing, like what do I vaccinate my cows for, what's an IM? It's got a lot of those. There's, I think it's 240 questions or something like that, kind of Q&A format. It'll be online, you can link into them and go right through those things, and those will be available fairly soon as well. So to sum up what we're doing at Southern, we're going to try so many different things. Hopefully at least one of them's going to work, but you never know until you try. You never know what is going to be a success or a failure until you try those things out. And some of the things that we thought would never work did, and some things I thought would like work wouldn't. So you have to try those things out and see where they are. We had planned on having our first field day in October. University system, we're only working 2 days a week, and it's hard to get anything done when you work 2 days a week. We got cows, calves, some of the things run into like that. So with that, I have some contact information. It's delighted to be back in the state of Louisiana again. I'm originally from Shreveport, so it's kind of good to be back home. Good to see so many friends and family around that are here. And I look forward to asking Ken McMillan all those questions that came up during this talk. And I didn't want to ask him since I knew I'd have 2 more hours when I get back. So good to be here, and I'll be around for a while. I look forward to chatting with you.
sure I understood this properly. So you're saying that getting grain into your calves the first 60 days is going to produce much better marble. Is that correct?
That is what the research indicates. If the issue gets into that it's got to stay there, and what causes marbling is different from what generates body fat. Most of the marbling, high starch feeds, that's why we grain feed cattle. I don't know if we really do that or not, but when I feed a high starch diet, it produces a lot of oleic acid, which is primarily what marbling is made of. So when I lose it, it loses real quickly. When I make it, I can make it pretty quickly, but the whole part about this thing is that's what the research project is to look and see if I get these calves from marbling when they're 60 and 70 days of age and I keep it on them, will they simply grade better when I get ready to process this line? Of course, we have ultrasound machines and things like that we can tell those kind of things in a live animal as compared, used to we had to kill them and say, oh dog, I missed that one. So this will be a whole lot better research project to get into in the future. Yes, sir.
Note that research was done with English breeds, not with continental or Roman-based breeds. That's why your project is so important.
Thank you, yes. Anything more? Well, I'll be around for a while. Look forward to working with any of you guys. See you soon.